Starbucks is one of the most popular companies in the world. I bet you've tried their coffee, or at least you've heard about it. But what if I told you Starbucks is closely related to Moby Dick, and that Italy played a part in creating one of the most successful corporations in the world? Stay tuned to learn the story of this corporate behemoth that roped in more than $29 billion in 2021. Before we move forward, if you enjoy finance content, consider subscribing or liking the video. I spend a lot of time researching these stories and only a small percentage of my viewers are subscribed. It's free and you can always change your mind. The story of Starbucks goes back to the 60s. Back then, most Americans preferred to make their coffee at home, and there was no urban coffee culture. However, that was about to change, thanks to a trip to Italy. In 1962, Gordon Bowker, a college dropout from Seattle, was on a trip to Milan when he found out what real coffee tastes like. He was hooked on the beverage. Unfortunately, he couldn't find the same taste in Seattle and had to drive to Vancouver, British Columbia, in search of quality coffee. One evening, he shared his story with university friends Jerry Baldwin and Seigl and proposed an idea. Why not start our own coffee company right here in Seattle? Jerry and Zev liked the idea so much that they quickly set about turning their vision into reality. There was no lack of enthusiasm from the three friends, but what they lacked was experience. Zev Seigl took over the task of finding a place that could provide them with the guidance to make their project successful. This was the pre-internet age, so Seigl went through phone books and newspapers in the public library until he found what the group was looking for. They found a gourmet coffee company in Berkeley, California, called Peet's. The place was owned by Alfred Peet, who was a Dutch immigrant and became known as the Dutchman who taught America how to drink coffee. Seigl phoned Alfred Peet, who was more than happy to mentor the young businessmen. Seigl was impressed by Alfred Peet's business prowess and his deep knowledge of coffee beans. The two became regular acquaintances, and in a few days, Seigl was off to California to learn more about the coffee business. Jerry Baldwin and Gordon Bowker also made visits to California, and Peet agreed to supply their company with coffee beans. Back in Seattle, the three partners found a storefront in the Pike Place Market. This would be the first location for their new company. But what would it be called? Baldwin and Bowker were working on starting another company at the time. Together, they wanted to make documentary films about American music and had named their company Pequod after the ship in Moby Dick. That venture did not work out, but played a role in naming their coffee company. A business partner of Bowker and Baldwin had claimed that words starting with ST were powerful, and the three founders chose Starbo to be the company name. However, they instantly remembered Starbuck, the name of the chief mate in Moby Dick. Pequod didn't work out, but the founders kept the Moby Dick connection going and named their new business Starbucks. On March 30th, 1971, with little cash and hardly any business experience, Gordon Bowker, Jerry Baldwin, and Zev Seigl took a leap of faith and opened their first coffee shop. However, Starbucks was nothing like the espresso bars serving beverages and freshly brewed coffee. Instead, they sold coffee beans, tea, and spices. The only brewed coffee they made was given away as samples. It was a marketing tactic to get people to engage with the business. People who visited were offered coffee, and that way they would stay at the shop and hopefully buy some of their coffee beans. That marketing technique worked. Word of their startup spread, and Gordon Bowker made the most of it with his background in journalism. He sent a sample of his coffee to Seattle Times columnist Don Duncan, who stopped by the store, got hooked on some more free samples, and wrote an enthusiastic story. Starbucks quickly became a household name in Seattle. By the end of the 70s, demand for these roasted coffee beans had grown, and the founders were looking to expand business. That was when they made a recruitment that would totally change the company's fortunes. Howard Schultz, an ex-salesman from Brooklyn, was now working as general manager of kitchenware manufacturer Hammerplast. That's when Starbucks caught his attention. He noticed that the small Seattle-based company was ordering more coffee makers than any of their larger customers. Intrigued, Schultz decided to pay a visit. He could see the potential this company had and wanted to be a part of it. Schultz met with Baldwin, Bowker, and Seigl with his New Yorker ideas and his youthful enthusiasm. The three business partners were reluctant at first, but Schultz was persistent and finally joined Starbucks as a marketing director. He knew Starbucks could do much more than roasting coffee beans. He knew the company could reach greater heights, and in 1982, he found out exactly how Starbucks would realize its enormous potential. Once again, the answer was in Italy. In 1982, Schultz represented Starbucks at a trading show in Milan. There, he was supposed to be introduced to coffee shops, which also served as social hubs. The espresso bars provided the Milanese society a meeting place where all kinds of political debate and local chatter ensued over a hot cup of coffee and a newspaper. Schultz was overwhelmed by the experience and was convinced that this was the future of Starbucks. He shared what he had experienced in Milan with the founders and floated the idea of turning Starbucks coffee shops into coffee bars that served espresso. What's wrong with serving coffee by the cup when the business is already booming? However, the founders were very skeptical. They had established Starbucks as a wholesaler and didn't want to change their modus operandi too much. Starbucks did, however, open its first espresso bar in 1984. But things weren't moving as quickly as Schultz wanted, and he left the company in 1985. Still under the influence of Milan's coffee bars, he opened up his own cafe named Il Giornale, which is Italian for the newspaper. Schultz found moderate success with his startup over the next 2 years, and in 1987, he had willing investors and enough money to make Starbucks an offer. By then, Jerry Baldwin had bought 4 locations of Peet's Coffee and was willing to make a deal. After of negotiations and the deal almost falling through, Schultz finally bought Starbucks for $3.8 million. That ushered a new era at the company. Starbucks was a successful brand in Seattle at the time, but Howard's vision was to make it the greatest worldwide. He took over as the company's CEO and set about his mission of turning Starbucks into more than just a coffee place. He wanted to turn his coffee shops into a cultural experience, first in Seattle, then throughout the States, and ultimately the world. He rebranded his Il Giornale outlets as Starbucks and quickly began to expand the company. That same year, Starbucks opened its first locations outside of Seattle in Vancouver B.C. and Chicago, Illinois. This outward expansion continued over the next 5 years, and by 1992, Starbucks had 140 outlets throughout North America. The company's revenues had risen from just over $1 million in 1987 to $73.5 million in 1992. They were roasting more than 6 million pounds of coffee annually, and the company's market value had swelled to $270 million. This is when Howard Schultz made another big decision. He decided to take Starbucks public. They raised about $25 million by selling at 12% stake and used the money to double Starbucks stores over the next 2 years. Starbucks had become unstoppable during the 90s, opening on average 2 new stores every day. In 1996, Starbucks moved out of North America and opened an outlet in Tokyo. This was yet another masterstroke by Schultz, as record numbers of Japanese had traveled to the United States in the 1990s, and Seattle was one of their most popular destinations. By the time Starbucks opened in Tokyo, many Japanese had a taste of their coffee. So, despite never spending much on marketing campaigns, Starbucks found a loyal client base in the country. The rewards were visible over the next 5 years as Starbucks opened 300 stores in the country and generated a revenue of $242 million in 2001. By now, Howard Schultz had stepped down as CEO and was watching the company's success from the sidelines. The free markets and the capitalist world order was fueling Starbucks' aggressive expansion. However, the company was losing its soul. Starbucks had originally attracted the masses for its unique experience. It was meant to be a meeting place, a place to socialize, but as they vied for more profit, the experience got lost. So, in the mid-2000s, the company lost much of its uniqueness. There were too many Starbucks, and with thousands and thousands of locations to cater to, the customer experience kept evaporating. The romance and theater that Schultz had imagined was gone, and Starbucks no longer seemed like the neighborhood store it started out as. All these factors were contributing to already dwindling profits when the recession hit. The man who had turned Starbucks into a billion-dollar corporation was called upon yet again, this time to save the company instead of expanding it. On January 8, 2008, Howard D. Schultz returned as CEO of Starbucks after a gap of 8 years. He had been taking note of what was going wrong. He found that the company's rapid expansion had distracted it from making its cafes an inviting place with new products. One of Schultz's first steps as CEO was writing a letter to the employees on the day he took office. The company must shift its focus away from bureaucracy and back to customers. He told the employees that the company's target was reigniting the emotional attachment with customers. Schultz was ruthless. He led a mass firing of executives and employees and closed down hundreds of stores that weren't making any profits, and instead taking a toll on customer experience. 1 year after Schultz took over as CEO, Starbucks had terminated an estimated 18,400 US jobs and closed down almost 1,000 stores worldwide. Schultz also introduced a national loyalty program and enforced fair trade standards to retake the company's loyal customer base. The company made great use of social media to involve the people in its initiatives. The company's campaign, My Starbucks Idea, was a huge success where customers exchanged ideas with each other and directly with the company. More than 93,000 ideas were shared by about 1.3 million users on social media. This increased Starbucks' outreach, and they took back some of their lost repute. One of the key business decisions he took was an aggressive expansion into the Chinese markets. Today, China is the second biggest market for Starbucks and generates almost 15% of the company's revenue. By 2020, Starbucks had expanded to more than 80 countries with over 30,000 stores worldwide. Revenues were through the roof, but the company was hit by a major controversy. You'd think that with $29 billion in revenue and a global chain of stores, Starbucks could look after their supply chains well. However, that has not been the case. In 2020, an investigation revealed that children under the age of 13 were working on farms in Guatemala that supply the chain with its world-famous beans. While Starbucks made billions, those children weren't so lucky and earned less than $5 a day on average, while some didn't even make $1. For a company so big on creating a loyal customer base and caring about people, the investigation was a major blot. Starbucks later clarified that the company had not made any transactions with the farms in recent years. However, this wasn't the first time that Starbucks was caught up in a major labor controversy. 2 years prior, local labor inspectors in Brazil published reports tying Starbucks to a plantation where workers were forced to live and work in filthy conditions. Starbucks had given the same explanation that the company had not made any recent transactions with these plantations, but that didn't stop a wave of criticism coming Starbucks' way. As Starbucks passes 50 years after its inception, it has become a part of American daily life. It is hard to fathom a world without a Starbucks on every corner. The corporation's story is fascinating and teaches some valuable lessons on how to achieve and sustain success, sometimes even at the expense of others. What do you think about Starbucks? Write "Coffee solves everything" in the comments below if you're a coffee fanatic. And if you learned something new from this, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to be the first to see our new videos. We make deep dives like this every week, where we uncover the secrets of money and business. Until next time.